have, okay, now we're recording also. Welcome everybody to the Higher Education and Corrections Council. I'm Jared Haynes, and I think most of us have met, but maybe just quick introductions before we get going. Representative Ballard is our new chair, as we'll talk about in a few minutes. And on the Senate side, the Senate has replaced Senator Owens with Senator Mike McKell. Senator McKell is excused today. He's at the Boston Marathon, and apparently it was wet there too. Representative Ballard, our other co-chair, is also excused. She had a sudden death of a friend this morning, and so she asked if I would conduct the meeting today. She may listen in on Zoom from time to time, depending on circumstances there. So I believe we have pretty much familiar faces. We've been here before. We'll have some perhaps other introductions as we go there, but we also have excused today Grace Acosta. She had a conflict with the hearing. Our student representative Roxy Molina also is excused, unable to attend today. I believe that Board of Pardons and Parole is going to send someone, but I don't know if we have anybody from Board of Pardons and Parole. Do we here? Okay, we'll keep an eye out for that. We have invited a couple of new representatives to join our meetings. Per statute, they're not voting members, but we're going to hear their voices loud and clear today, and always. And so we're going to have them be regular participants in addition to our institution representatives. And so from the representing the Utah Sheriff's Association, we have Sheriff Chad Jensen, the Cache County Sheriff. Sheriff Jensen, would you like to just take a quick introduction?
Sure, thank you, and thank you for the invite to the committee. I'm Sheriff Jensen with the Sheriff's Association. I'm the immediate past president. We have great relationships and partnerships with the Department of Corrections. We want to be a good partner with this group as well, and do what we can and for the inmates in our jails.
Appreciate that, Sheriff. We're excited to have you along here. We will be having some further conversations with the sheriffs in the coming weeks, and see if there are some things that we can do to help facilitate education in the county jails as well. Also, we welcome Stephanie Patton. Welcome, Stephanie. She's the probably have to make corrections on titles, but Director of Adult Education for the Utah State Board of Education. And we wanted to have them be regular invitees to our meetings because they're very much involved and probably vastly outnumber the amount of education that we're doing in higher education at this point, just with adult education. I don't know exactly how much you do there, but quick introduction, Stephanie.
Yeah, so Stephanie Patton, my title technically is Adult Education Coordinator, but you're right, Director for, yeah. So let's see, been in the correctional, I guess I started in the correctional space back in Duchesne County, in the Duchesne County Jail, doing some adult education work there. Moved up to the state and have been the correctional education specialist at the Utah State Board of Education for 6 years before I moved into the director position. So I don't know. We do lots of great things, you know, in the jails and prisons, and we're in 25 county jails in addition to the 2 prisons. So pretty extensive placement there.
We're glad to have you. We need you here, and hope we can do some good things together. Already been doing something. Council members, we have joining us on Zoom. We have Rich Christiansen, welcome, and Helen Hansen from Workforce Services. With that, let's go ahead with our agenda. The first item, I believe we have a quorum with at least 7 members. And so the first item is the approval of the minutes that were attached to your agenda. And by the way, these materials are also attached to your calendar appointment if you have a calendar appointment. And we have copies of the room here as well. So with that, we'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes. The November 9th meeting. Motion. Okay, Dan Powers, motions are second. And Mr. Buckboy, any discussion of that motion? Okay, all in favor? Say aye. Aye. Okay, opposed? The minutes are approved.
You're dealing with a bunch of academics, we're not used to this.
I know, it's just a lot of work. Formality.
But we're learning, we're getting.
Dave is on to me, so we spent too much time together, I guess. So just in terms of housekeeping, item 3 on the agenda is terms of office. We realized as we're reviewing the statute that everybody's term of office expires June 30th. And so that means that whoever is your appointing authority for the statute, we will contact them and let them know how happy we are with the service that you've been rendering and invite them to either appoint, reappoint, or replace. And if you have some bugs you'd like to put in our ears about what we say to them about that, let me know and we'll do that. But we're excited you've all been serving here, but we'll be just notifying them of the need to either reappoint or replace you starting July 1st. Another thing that we're a little bit sad about, and that's with Senate Bill 146 that passed this session on higher education governance, that reduces the size of the Board of Higher Education quite significantly, and in doing so, it also removed the 2 board member positions from the Higher Education and Corrections Council effective July 1st. So board member Chris Jansen and board member Costa, we've got 3, what is it, April now? 3 months to really do some good mischief or some good. So we appreciate what you've been doing and what we're going to do for the next little while. But so I'll simply reduce the size of this council by 2 members. You're welcome to continue attending. We have lots of good participation activity, and we will be continuing to be represented in higher education by the commissioner's designee and the institutions that are assigned to serve as voting council members. So any questions about that? We'll just go ahead and let folks know about that. Little formalities there. Okay, so the chairs have asked us to provide a recap of where we are as a council and what's gone on in the legislative session. I'll just pull up some slides here and we'll summarize some of what's gone on that's brought us to this point. Quick pause while I try to conduct the meeting and share screen at the same time. Share screen. And find the screen. There we go. All right, so button says start the slides. Okay. All right, so just a recap of where we are as a council. Appreciate everybody's contributions as we've come to this point. But just a reminder that the objective, the guiding objective that we set for ourselves last year, it reflects what the statute calls for us to do, what the state expects us to do as a council. But it's a good time just to remind ourselves what we've been doing and what we are charged with continuing to do. And that is to recommend actions and funding to be applied or discontinued. Remember, we were thoughtful about these words. Don't just keep doing what we're doing just because we've always done it that way, but always look at the things we should discontinue as well as that. But recommend, excuse me, actions and funding to be applied or discontinued to provide for completion of higher education and corrections facilities that will yield sustainable employment and successful integration for returning citizens and facilitate access to educational opportunities beyond incarceration and an educational experience consistent with the college setting. Any comments or questions about that as we kind of remind ourselves where we are and where we're going? Okay. The next thing, just a brief summary of where we ended our 2022 activities with our Higher Education and Corrections Council report that was provided to the Board of Higher Education, the Department of Corrections, and to the Higher Education Appropriations Subcommittee and Education Interim Committee in the Legislature. In that report, just a summary here of what our recommendations were that we voted on as a council in November. More details in the report, but just to jog our memories, there was a recommendation that the Board of Higher Education and the Department of Corrections together consider approaching the governor about a statement in support of higher education in the corrections setting. I don't know if we've had follow-up action on that, but we can continue to discuss and follow up on that as you see fit. Second bullet, maintain and fund current programming. That's to look at the program that we currently have or have had at the correctional facilities with the technical education and general education that's being provided and funded there. Maintain and fund that if there are needs for those current programs, to focus on those, but then to defer for further study additional kinds of programs in education. Third, on the Board of Higher Education side, was to support student advisor legislation. More on that to come. On the corrections side, recommendation to consider ways to house students together in units that are conducive to education support. Prioritizing and funding tablets, provide and fund access and reduce interruptions to students. And I think all of these are going to follow up in the course of this meeting. Items that were included in the report for further study, you see there that dealing with educational programs, funding models, pathways, data collection, evaluation of our prison education, county jails, access and continuity, employer access and engagement. And as we get into our work plan, our recommended work plan later in this meeting, you'll see that we're going to drill down into some of those. Post that in. Finally, just on some of the legislation that took place during the last session, House Bill 203 by Representative Ballard on inmate education amendments. I've outlined the main provisions pertaining to higher education there on the slide that were included in the bill as it was introduced. Just to kind of walk you through that, over the course of the session, there were some substitutes introduced. The first substitute, the original bill was going to require that corrections use the telephone surcharge account to fund student advisors and staff from UC that would be providing the oversight and support there. With the issues of all of the telephone surcharge fund, that was removed from the first substitute. There was also an education plan for each inmate that was taken from the first sub. And on the computer literacy, we originally started, Stephanie, with a provision that Board of Education would provide the standards for what would be considered computer literacy, how to assess that. That was removed, and I think in the interest of more simplicity and in the first substitute. First substitute was not adopted, but at the same time, a second substitute was considered by the committee, and that's what the House committee went with. You'll see that in the second substitute, it removed the common housing for students as being a requirement there. And it also had some of the same provisions in the first substitute. And then from there, with the favorable recommendation, I went to the floor of the House, and there we saw a third substitute based on discussion that was raised in the committee. Some concerns about requiring tablets in the county jails, or at least just clarifying that we're not going to necessarily include the burden of providing a tablet for every inmate in the county jails there. And then finally, so the third substitute was adopted in the House. The Senate committee had a favorable recommendation on it. It did not make it to the Senate floor. It was held in Senate rules. And in an effort to facilitate having it come out of rules, a fourth substitute was provided that essentially pulled out anything that had a fiscal note on it, but that did not make it to the floor. So that's just a summary of what was considered, and I know that the chairs are interested in following up on some of these same issues, whether they're in statute or in bills or just stuff that we work on together. And in our role as a higher education corrections council, for us to be able to look at them and really provide a good recommendation as to what to do, whether it's legislation or problem solving or whatever it might be. A couple other pieces of legislation that the chairs wanted us to just quickly review. Representative Matthews sponsored a bill on offender employment. Helen, you might know a little bit more about this, but this requires, this did pass, I believe. It requires the Department of Workforce Service to create a web portal where employers can post jobs that are available to individuals that have criminal histories. And it would also require the Department of Human Resources to guide state agencies in the employment of individuals with criminal histories for the state. And also provides that the Department of Corrections will ensure that inmates have access to that portal within 30 days prior to release, I believe is what it was. And then finally, House Bill 194, Representative Ballard asked us to just review what's in that, even though it was from the previous year, because we're really finishing up the first year and getting started implementing on that. That was on Department of Corrections Education Services. The 5 main points on there is that education would be made available to inmates as soon as possible after they get their case action plans, that the educational opportunities will be consistent for both women as well as men, that inmates will have access to financial aid applications, that there'll be considerations made in decisions about transfers, relocations, discipline, any other kinds of things that might interrupt a student, an incarcerated student's education, and consider ways as those decisions are made to minimize those. And then an annual report to our Education Appropriations Subcommittee. Again, we'll have more detail on those later on the agenda. So with that, that's kind of where we are. And any questions or comments as we go? I think we can get into the meat of some of these as we get farther down. But barring any questions, then we'll go on to the next item, which is the chairs asked Department of Corrections to give us a status report of the provisions in that House Bill 194, where they are on those things, as well as the items related to House Bill 203. Even though it wasn't passed, where are we on some of those issues? So with that, it looks like Screecia is working. Somebody have a wand somewhere?
Magic is happening in the background.
Andrea,
Don't
this is you.
even ask the question about where the curtain lives. All right, so I am Andrea Parrish. I'm director over the programming division at Utah Department of Corrections. It is my great pleasure to be on this council as a member. I just want to remind everyone that a lot of what we do here can only be done with really excellent support, great minds coming together to make this happen, because as you probably know, or maybe need to appreciate, delivering high quality education behind bars is really hard. And it's not because we're like defeatists or we're like not tough people willing to do hard things. It's just, there's a ton of security challenges. It's complicated just helping people meet the needs and find out where they're at and then get them to the place they need to go. So there's just like a logistic challenges, a lot of the same things that happen in any other school, but just more complicated and a lot more secure. So I just want to just remind you guys that we're doing hard work here, and I appreciate the support and the heavy lift. It's good work, it's really valuable, and thank you for going on this journey with us.
Andrea, before we get farther, just to mention that there was a written report provided as well. And
yes,
that's attached to your meeting appointment. And we also
yes,
have copies of the report.
we were asked to provide a detailed written report, so hopefully you'll find that sufficiently detailed. If you don't, please reach out. We're happy to answer any questions you may have. And thank you, Brian Fowler, for putting that together. So I can't control
Someone else is
permissions.
controlling
We'll
the
just
screen. I think you have
we'll
to
just
say
do the
next
best.
slide.
All right. So I think rather than talk to you about why I think higher education is valuable, I'd just like to share with you kind of the perspective from the students.
I'll mute their sound if we're not hearing. Yeah, and pause that. Whoever's controlling that, we need to get the sound up. Are you hearing anything out on Zoom land? No, okay. So it must not be on. Okay.
And maybe this won't work, but the point was just to say, there are people that right now are incarcerated and getting the benefits of our education. And rather than just believe me, I thought I'd just let them share their experience directly.
Okay, they're
There's
working on it in the other room.
Okay.
Okay, maybe one more try. This is where we have color commentary by who's Ryan.
Well, so let me just remind everyone kind of,
About that?
let's get into the why. So we know that providing education in prison has proven to reduce recidivism. It's associated with higher educational success. It improves public safety by allowing individuals to return home to their communities where they will be our friends and neighbors. Moreover, a RAND study
I've
that
been
was
there
done.
for a month, and I've learned a lot about word processing and Excel and Outlook, and I never knew what all those buttons were made for before. So it's glad to like know and experience the things that I'm learning today and know what to do with it and how to excel in it.
Yeah, I graduated the program back in 2020, and then I went on as a teacher's assistant, and I've been doing that ever since. So
Well, I want to be able to make a better future for myself, after coming to prison, and it's helped me be able to refocus my life, and instead of hanging back in the section where all the negativity, there's a lot of negativity out there, and being in here helps me focus on my future and where I'm going instead of focusing on the past.
Well, with this, it'll help me run my own personal laptop or computer at home, It's just, I wanted to just better myself and get more of a wider education, and stuff. So, because most of the time I've just done warehouse work. So this gives me an opportunity to learn a different trade.
And it's real therapeutic and it's helpful. Like, it's a game changer. Like, we're able to get taken out of the prison environment when we come in here. It's like, for the 6 hours that I'm here, it's like I'm not even incarcerated.
It's been great. You just don't get this opportunity. You got to work for it and strive for it. Being that you're able to get into a class like this, and of course, it's been nothing but good. So, it keeps my days busy. It keeps me out of trouble. It keeps my mind right. Good opportunities all the way around.
But if it wasn't for this, I would be in a very bad place right now. I'll be honest with you. I'd be in a bad place mentally, spiritually lost, disconnected. This program here is saving my life right now. Yeah.
I get emotional, but it would be like living in that same dysfunctional life that was offered to me when I was a young child. So I wouldn't be able to develop the choices of making a positive choice because I'm stuck and surrounded by negative choices. You can choose to be stuck around these negative choices and decisions in here, just like you can on the streets. And if we didn't have this available to us, then we wouldn't be able to better ourselves and learn like what it is out there that is offered to us. And when we are offered it, we know how to do it.
And these opportunities are gonna be what motivates others to want to do better. These opportunities is what's gonna give us the motivation to want to stay out of here, and make us not feel like we're just inmates and this and that we do have opportunities that can better our lives, that this isn't the end result, that there's life after this and there's careers after this, and we can make other people happy after this due to what we're learning.
The way my life was going, I never would have had this opportunity, all this devastating stuff that comes with being incarcerated, this is a perfect opportunity for you to come and learn and do something with something that's been broken down to build yourself back up.
Well, a lot of people think that if you get in trouble, like, why should you guys be given the resources? Because you guys weren't worrying about it then. But like a lot of times out there, like a lot of people don't have stability until they come here. Like there's a lot more resources here than when you're out on the streets. So like when you build a foundation in here, like you have a lot more like going for yourself to be able to make it out there, because like it gives you that confidence in here. If you can do it in here, then like it gets you in the habit of being responsible and being able to make it out there.
All right, next slide, please.
I've only been in there for a month and I've learned.
We'll get there.
There you go.
Stand by. So to promote public safety, we have our returning citizens develop a successful reentry plan. And we call that our case action plan. And what successful reentry looks like for us is it happens as soon as people come into our care or custody. We screen them using a validated risk assessment tool to understand their core criminogenic risk factors. We also look for basic literacy assessments, English as a second language, and other assessments related to targeted interventions that will deal with their substance use or their sex offense treatment. Secondly, we use these assessments to deploy our case managers, who are going to be kind of like guides to help people navigate the system and get through all of the challenging work that they have ahead of them to reduce risk and hopefully help them return as citizens to our society. Finally, we use our education, volunteer, and treatment resources to deliver effective, individualized interventions in the right amount and at the right time to promote lasting behavioral change. Next slide. So programming opportunities can begin as soon as a person enters our system, which statutorily is 90 days that we have to build a case action plan, but typically we are able to complete those within 40 days, which is about the time it takes to stabilize somebody and perform assessments. Individuals are then moved into a housing unit and assigned a case manager who will support them throughout their stay. This leads to buy-in and more successful reentry. As for substance use and sex offense treatment, we get this question all the time, so I just want to be clear. Timing is a really important factor for maximizing public safety. According to evidence-based practices, treatment is most effective when it is applied closer to when a person leaves rather than earlier. So if we provide treatment too soon, we could actually be enhancing the risk that they posit to society, and we don't want to do that. So really trying to follow a recipe and get it right. And there's a lot of individualized needs out there, right? So each person is going to have a different risk profile, different potential involvement with criminal histories, drug use, other things. And we have to build a recipe that's going to work well for them and do it for a lot of people, right? Roughly 5,000 people annually. So there's a lot to do. As you can see in this next slide, most of our educational seats are either at or near capacity. This chart shows enrollments at our 2 state correctional facilities. If there's missing data, it's because we don't house women at our Central Utah site. That's a men's only site. And it shows that we're really committed to keeping our seats full and doing, providing as many educational opportunities as we can. If there's somebody that has basic literacy or numeracy skills, we're trying to help them be prepared to take advantage of our higher education classes. And we've partnered with some of the LDS faith leaders to help us develop a program for literacy intervention, which is gonna help us in the big picture, right? Which is something new that we really needed to do. And we're still trying to build capacity. That's an entirely volunteer-led initiative. Next slide. So I think many of you are familiar with the sizable uphill battle returning citizens face as they reenter society. Housing insecurity, addressing substance use treatment and mental health needs, obtaining employment with a felony conviction are a few of the notable hurdles they face. Our experience with recent pandemic highlighted another significant hurdle of successful reentry, which is the digital divide. While most students across Utah could turn to technology to maintain access to their studies and avoid painful isolation, those who remain behind bars and the people who care for them were not adequately prepared to make this technological shift. Consequently, we had very limited education momentarily and significant pressure to act quickly. Next slide. Fortunately, often necessity is the mother of invention. We secured some COVID relief funds to purchase some tablets. We purchased 2,500 tablets, which is enough for every other individual to have one. And then I just want to highlight that a recent article I just read where internet access is considered a critical social determinant of health. So your capacity to be a healthy human is very much dictated by your access to the internet. And we want to recognize that's true behind bars as well. So disappointingly, legislative session maybe didn't go as well for us as we had hoped. We were able to get our technology request proposal through the governor's office. They included it in the governor's budget, but we weren't successful in getting the legislature to back it. So hopefully next year is another opportunity to try again. In the meantime, we decided to not choose despair. We have been seeking additional federal funds to continue to keep the programs that we know are invaluable to our returning citizens afloat. We recently submitted 2 federal grants. One was to help establish the necessary infrastructure to provide remote education, teleassessments, and telehealth, which will be a game changer. The second is a pilot program for our women specifically, which would allow them each to receive a tablet and access to additional resources currently not available on our tablets, which includes a very promising program called Interactive Life, which I'm happy to tell you guys more about offline if you're interested. We hope to circle back again next legislative session with the support of you guys and maybe a better strategy to get some more technology support, because you know, we're trying to do this out of one-time funds, and really what we need is to secure some ongoing funds to really make our tablet program and the technology upgrades that we need a success. Next slide. So just to give you a kind of overview of some of the things, and this is not comprehensive, but these are the big things that we currently have on our tablets that our incarcerated population has access to. Returning citizens can contact their case managers, therapists, or chaplains, read books, work on life skills. They can fill out forms and order commissary, just as an example of some things they currently do. In addition, we have some new things online that we're working on. We're going to be adding EBSCO Learning Express, which allows our students to improve their academics, pass a high school equivalency test, prepare for college, attain an occupational certification, find a job, and explore careers. They're also, through EBSCO, able to access JSTOR content, right? So they have the entire breadth of kind of academic journals and periodicals. So that's, I think, valuable for some of our higher education students. Our next plan is to add Canvas, which is a learning management system that is used across the state in all of our educational institutions. And then finally, we're going to be working and have been having conversations to partner with Utah courts to allow access to self-help resources that will address some of their civil litigation needs. Next step, please. HB 194 by Representative Ballard and Senator Escamilla gave us some powerful language and educational directives that we're excited to continue to take on. First, we are refining our process for delivering education, ensuring we can provide educational opportunities as soon as a case action plan is built and our educational assessments are completed, which is again about 40 days. These assessments are needed to make sure that we place our students in the appropriate classes. Second, we are significantly enhancing educational opportunities for women. Davis Adult Technology is now offering 3 new classes, and we have the person here that can speak to it, Dan. We're offering new classes at the Dell Women's Center at our Utah State Correctional Facility. We're offering automation and robotics, web and graphic design, and information technology. And then there's also some really exciting plans by the University of Utah's Prison Education Project to offer some, well, the first ever bachelor's degrees at our institution, and we'll have to get an update, but my hope is that this will begin starting this fall of 2023. Third, preparations are underway to welcome new higher education funding in the form of Pell Grants this July. Congress recently expanded access to Pell Grants once again to include students who are incarcerated. If they are enrolled in approved prison education programs and meet other requirements, then they can participate. Salt Lake Community College is well positioned, in my opinion, to support students in accessing these funds, and we're working with other institutions of higher education to also take advantage of this new federal revenue. And we had a recent visit with the Barrett Institute, and they were very pleased. They said that Utah may be one of the best positioned states to take advantage of this funding. So we're doing a good job of being ready and prepared for this, in my opinion. So there's and sorry, this isn't tracking super well because I forgot to say advance the slide, but we're on slide 13. If that's helpful. So the challenge, one of the challenges that we've had is having movement, sort of making it challenging for people to complete or continue their educational progress. And we're really trying to take this challenge seriously and see what we can do. One of the things that we're working on right now is to design an educational hold in our system called OTRAC. And this will just sort of create some accountability so that if somebody is moved, that there's a sort of paper trail of who moved them and the why behind the move, so that people aren't being arbitrarily moved because they don't understand kind of the value or importance of education. And then the other piece that I think is a big part of what we're trying to accomplish is helping our students co-reside in a housing unit that will foster and facilitate a really excellent learning environment. And we've been having very earnest conversations with our partners and friends in prison operations who they're over housing insecurity. So I don't get to trump them ever, right? I don't get to tell them what to do or how to do their jobs, but I do have the opportunity to work with them and address some of their challenges, which is chiefly a severe shortage in staff. But if we're partnering together, getting creative ideas about co-housing some of our students, well, all of our students. And I don't want to make any promises I can't deliver on, but I think that, you know, we're working and we're making progress, and that I can anticipate something is going to happen in the near future. Finally, HB 194 asked us to find ways to continue education during periods of lockdown. I think the tablets hold the best promise of being able to help us deliver that, whether that's a classroom that's being offered remotely and everyone can chime in collectively. I think there's a lot of power in the future and in our investment in technology to make sure that lockdowns, which are frequent, pandemics, which hopefully are infrequent, don't stop our capacity to continue to deliver high quality education. So I just want to wrap up by saying I feel that we're really supportive to have legislative support behind this and the people in this room who really want us to help improve education. House Bill 226 established this council, and we remain optimistic that we can work collectively to continue to magnify the good that is already taking place in our prisons. This bill allowed us to hire our first education specialist, which is sitting beside me, Brian Faber. We're really excited to have him. Not only our team in programming, but prison operations, other teams love having an educational resource in the prison. He's been a huge asset, so thank you. I just want to remind everyone that we're building case action plans in less than half the time required of us, resulting in more educational opportunities sooner. We've secured federal funding and to continue to enhance our education, despite not having all the legislative funding that we would like to have optimally. We've already built a robust tablet program and continue to show that it's going to be powerful for our education students and for everyone in general. And that women now have more opportunities than ever for higher education within the prison environment. So I think in summation, we've had some really good progress in the last couple of years. We're grateful for all the support that you guys offer. I know this is a team effort, and it's an honor to see where we can go and what we can accomplish together. So thank you. If you guys have any questions for us, this is our contact information. We're happy to respond. You should also have sort of a detailed report digging into some of the statutory language and a response to kind of where we're at with those things.
Thank you, Andre. That's a great report. What questions do any of you have about the presentation or the report that was attached? Done a great job answering.
I have just an observation.
Yes.
I appreciate the presentation because I feel like this was a really helpful overview of what's happening, the challenges, and so forth. That is a good way to restart the council. To kind of here's the big picture of what's going on. That information I think is very valuable. And I don't know, just I felt that in the discussions that took place previously in the previous year, there was not enough understanding on a lot of our parts as to the challenges that were addressed here and presented. And so I think it's helpful to understand that and to have that as the opening of the framework. So thank you.
I had a question on one of the earlier slides there.
Sure.
I don't know if we can pull back up or if we need to, but there's one that had the capacity and the enrollment.
Sure.
Of each of the institutions there. I was just curious, when we talk about capacity and we have a bar that shows we have this many seats and this many students, does that look different depending on what kind of program it is? For example, are we talking one seat in a 3 credit hour class versus one seat in a full semester, or 600-hour technical program, or does that give us a pretty good feel for how much?
Yeah.
I can give a little more detail on that. It's specific to each educational institution. How they and the representatives can give a little bit more detail as well, but you know, their ability to have a certain number of students is based on a number of factors for them. It's the funding that they receive, sometimes limited by the amount of faculty that they can hire. So they may have a lot of students wanting to use that educational program, but that institution may be limited by the number of faculty they can hire. So they have to cap their enrollment number. Or it may be a limit of space. The space that that institution has at a facility may limit the number of students for the classrooms. So that may be the limit for that program. In an adult ed situation, they work with the school district. So as many people as enroll, they usually are allowed to keep enrolling them and then hire more teachers based on that. So each institution is a little bit different on how they set their cap. And so our percentage that we used was, I would say, more of a, there's not an exact formula for how we came up with it. It was kind of just talk to Salt Lake Community College, talk to Davis Tech, talk to South Park, and said, hey, where are you about your enrollment?
How many people we could take?
Yeah, they said, well, we're about capped out right now, or we're about 90%, 85%. But I don't know if any of those representatives want to add to that.
Well, and those numbers were really low for adult ed. The last, when I ran them on April 1st, 459 were in CUCF, well, CUA, sorry, and 159 in South Park. And in the past, like, that's still really low. We just haven't recovered from shakeups for adult ed. Like in the past in CUA, we've had over 1,000. In South Park at one point they've always been lower than CUA since my time there, but South Park has been, as high as 500 or 600. So we're like, that's partly COVID and just like our own personnel changes and things, but I would love to see that number higher. We're really low. Yeah.
Agree.
And I think the overarching message here is if we build it, they will come. We have to build capacity. If the goal here is to ensure education for everyone, then we just need to continuously work on how we can grow more seats so that, because the challenge is not occupying those seats. We have willing students. We just need to build more space for those students, more opportunities. And again, we're all constrained by space, by resources, all those things. And we also know that all the good that can come out of education, investment in education really is an investment in your future neighbor. You can think of it that way. When they return home, I would prefer to have a neighbor that's received some education, understands a kind of more holistic global perspective on the world, rather than one that really hasn't tried or thought about anything. So I think that obviously the data supports it, but just on a personal level, we want to make sure we have a safer society and educated people as a part of that equation.
Okay, thank you, Andre.
And if I could add to that, from Salt Lake Community College's perspective, in terms of capacity, with the full restitution of Pell, we will be able to, within a year, to handle all of the needs for general education in the prison facility. We will have the structure in place, and we will have the ability to handle that. And so the only restraints at that stage will be space and those things will be fixed. So I think the future is bright with this restitution. I think we will be able to work together to address all of the needs, and that's exciting.
Okay, with that, let's go to our next agenda item. You have attached to your agenda proposed work plan for the council for this year. I've been working with the chairs on what we might suggest there based on our past reports and some wishes that have been expressed by some. And what I'll do is I'll put it up on the screen and maybe just talk through a little bit here with together. And what we'd like to do is discuss this, have your input on it. And at the end of the day, let's have a vote on here's what we're going to focus on this year, or some things we'd like to do. Okay, and we're sharing. Okay. So again, just a reminder there of our guiding objective. You can see that there that we've just discussed. And some thoughts as we think about how do we approach our meetings and our work together. The first thing on there, with dealing with priority criteria, the suggestion is let's limit our meetings. There's a cajillion things we can talk about in these meetings, and sometimes we do because we start getting ideas, and that's great. We want to capture them as much as we can, but we think that we might be able to get some good work done if we can prioritize the things that we're going to put on the agenda. And if there are things that can be done by others or taken care of offline or delayed for another meeting and have some additional preparation, let's do that and occupy our time as a council here, looking at some good recommendations, commiserating on, that's the wrong word, I used that again. Andrea taught me that.
Celebrating our wins.
Collaborating, sorry. Collaborating on some of these issues and just have our meetings deal with our highest priorities. Second, just a suggestion that if you have things that you'd like to bring to the council, if we can think of those in advance, let me know. I'll review those with the chairs as we craft our agendas each time. And third, in preparing for the agenda, last year we were doing it for the first time and kind of getting our legs under us. And I think we got to the last meeting and we had a rough draft of some things that could go in the final report, and we voted on some of them, but I'm not sure how deliberate we were during the course of the year in identifying the things that we really wanted to put forward as recommendations as a group. And so maybe we can be a little more clear by that on that by if there are items that you're bringing to the council, let's have you maybe provide a summary or a background of the issues like Andrea did today. And then give us an evidence-based recommendation that the council can consider, and we can talk about it together and say, yeah, that's a good idea. We want to put that forward as a recommendation to corrections or recommendations to the Board of Higher Education. Or it's a bad idea, or we want to adjust this or that as a council there. And then once we've identified things we want to include as recommendations, we'll just take your materials and include those in our report at the end of the year. And encouragement to have everybody speak for those that you represent, and not get too caught with groupthink. It's easy for me to do. Sometimes I know that Brian is gonna not like this idea that I'm thinking about, so I'm not gonna talk about it or bring it up, or I'm gonna be a little bit too gentle.
I thought you were thinking of something specific.
Anyway, so with that, the proposal here is that we schedule 4 meetings between now and November. We finish our work in November and turn in our report to the legislature and to the other entities as well. But the proposal is for 4 meetings, Tuesday afternoons, 1 to 3 p.m. like we were doing today. And that would be today, June 13th, September 12th, October 31st. And we may have to adjust from time to time. We do have a new co-chair. The schedule was developed with the previous co-chair, who's no longer part of us, and we haven't had an opportunity to connect with the new chair to see if the schedule works. But assuming that this works, then this would be the proposed meeting schedule. Items for the agendas, we put some on there and we kind of sequenced them a bit. And we also made a place here for other items. We can't get to everything this year, or we're not ready to get to some things this year, so we kind of make a parking lot for other items that maybe we'll take care of outside the meeting. Some of these things we can work on if the council would like to recommend that they be worked on. we hold them till next year or rearrange our priorities. So with that, hopefully you all had a chance to look at it. You can maybe browse through it right now and see if are we missing some important things on here that we need to try to accomplish, or that you recommend we try to accomplish this year. Are there some that maybe are less important in your view or in the view of the group that we would like to make time for those? So just quickly going through the proposal here, we have this meeting's agenda in front of us. We're going to talk about the budget process and student housing and mobility and tablets and technology. But for the next meeting, we would be looking to have an inmate population profile, if that works for corrections. I'm going to working on some things with internal audits and data and so on. But the thought there is if we can have in front of us, what's the landscape? We saw a slide here that said we had 5,800, I think, something, inmates across the state. Where are they? What's their demographic? What's their readiness for education? How many are working on high school before they can be ready? How many are in a space where they can work on high school and post-secondary simultaneously? What are the characteristics there? Where are they located? How many are out in county jails and how many in each jail facility? And does that lead to opportunities to look at particular programs to different locations? So a population profile, to spend some significant time reviewing that together as kind of our foundation. We want to have some time for the sheriffs to share with us some of the things that they're dealing with in the county jails. What is our inmate profile in the counties? What's the readiness for post-secondary education? What are the barriers and recommendations that the sheriffs are seeing that, and what are ways that we as a council can recommend being helpful to inmates that are in the county facilities? Third, budget recommendations. I'll get to that in a minute, but essentially one of our responsibilities is if there are budget items that we want to recommend as a council that the Board of Higher Education consider. We don't as a council request funds from the legislature or provide recommendations to the legislature. We provide them to the Board of Higher Education. They determine what they will include in their higher education request. Corrections determines what will go in your request to the governor, then goes to the legislature. And so in order to plug in those processes, if there are things that we want to look at recommending for funding, as much as possible, if we could do that this summer, between now and the next meeting, we can move some of those forward. Now, there will be some things that as we go along beyond the summer that we'll go, oh yeah, we're gonna need some funding for that. And we can certainly include that in recommendations, but they may or may not be able to make it in budget requests if we do that. So we'll get back to that a little bit, but that would be an opportunity in the June meeting to finalize those budget recommendations. And then the September meeting, having that inmate, that population profile in front of us. We have the institution representatives that have already begun to have some conversations about what are we doing right now with our programs. What are the things that we would recommend adding or linking or combining or eliminating or whatever it might be. What are the roles of institutions in different kinds of education or different fields of study. Let's have some recommendations brought forward that we can consider there based on that profile. Second, the student support is the follow-up on the student advisor efforts that we had last year. Does that work best the way it was proposed last year, or are there some recommendations that the institutions will have as we do either institutional requests or statewide requests or things that corrections deals have the telephone surcharge fund on there, and maybe that's just part of a broader conversation about funding. What are the resources that we are using? And is that the best way to deploy those resources or position them to support the recommendations that we would put forward? What one thought is, can we take a look at the surcharge fund? What's in it? How does it come? Is it sustainable? Is it the right way to approach these for the future, or do we need to look at alternatives? And then number 4 would be kind of our preparation to identify our priorities and recommendations for this year. We have our initial conversation on that. By that time, we will have had some recommendations already that we would put in front of us. We've discussed those and any others we want to include, and we've used that to put together our draft of the annual report, which we would look at in our last meeting in October and vote on the final recommendations there. And so in the final meeting, we might have some time to look at some national prison education issues. That's a great conversation with Bureau Institute, and there might be some things that could help inform what we do. We would consider looking at accessibility and continuity of education, maybe just a follow-up on some of the things we've talked about here today. What are we doing or could we be doing to keep classes going? Should we consider a third-party assessment? Maybe we're good enough with what we have in the consultation as a council. Maybe folks like Vera can give us some good consultation, some insights, or do we recommend that we have a third-party assessment fund and have someone come in and really study how we're doing prison education, and then our final report. And then in other items at the end of the list there, we talked about putting the Pell and the federal prison education program process on the agenda. We kind of feel like that can be taken care of offline. It's already underway. We're dealing with it. If there are things that you want to have recommendations from the council, then read those and add those.
And I can include updates on that in our agenda as well.
Yeah. It'd be great to have some time to discuss employment. Perhaps our friends at Workforce Service can help us identify some things that we can do to align our education programs with the workforce opportunities. Maybe some of that can be done offline. I put that note in there in the work plan. Reintegration processes. I don't know how all that works, and I wonder if it would help inform our education programs if we have a good understanding both from Board of Departments of Correction or the probation as well as Department of Corrections, and what happens as we prepare to get to that release time, and what happens after release. There's ongoing things that happen there, and how do we plug education and employment into that? And then I think it would be helpful and interesting. And again, this might be some things that we can deal with offline. How do high school pathways work? How do we identify the inmates that need remediation, need to complete high school? How do we identify the educational pathways for them? So those are some proposed items for us to work on this year. And I would open it for discussion or thoughts on things that you think we ought to add or reinforce on here or clarify or change, or any suggestions you have there.
I'm just having a very well-formed thought.
And those are the best kind to start with.
Yeah, good to start with. Hopefully we can clarify it as I kind of say it out loud. I'm currently teaching in the women's facility every Monday night a history course.
I'm just going to pause. Can we hear out in Zoom land? We need to speak louder. Okay, thank you.
I've been described many times as ear-splittingly loud by my students, so hopefully that's all good. So David and I run into each other every once in a while on the way into the facility, and one of the jarring things for me, every time I've gone in and done a class is how little I know actually about the students' kind of everyday lives on the inside. And how when I learn about the kind of pragmatic realities of going about their day and attempting to pursue education, it often forces me to change any number of things about the way a class runs, about the way classes are organized and scheduled, and so on and so forth. So one of the things that we kind of don't have in this schedule is that incarcerated student perspective, which is tremendously difficult to get, and I recognize all of the difficulties associated with that. I do think it might be useful, and I'm thinking here too of the really great video that you showed us, Andrea, with those kind of testimonials from students. I do think it might be useful to get a incarcerated student perspective on some of the mechanics of what we're doing. I've had discussions with my own students about tablets and the kind of pluses and minuses of kind of using them in conjunction with higher education at the kind of level that I'm doing, probably outdated. So I wonder if there are ways we can get that student perspective that might ultimately help us kind of build a kind of culture of buying in on the part of incarcerated students as well. I recognize, again, that super difficult to do, but
It's not. I think actually to get this right, we need ongoing focus groups that are driven by our incarcerated people who are in these programs, giving us feedback. That's how we learn if we've got it right or if we've got it wrong. Sometimes that feedback can be not what you expect, right? Like, because I hold these focus groups, we've been holding them for our women and infants program that we're trying to open soon. And what you learn is so interesting and not anything you could have potentially guessed, right? So it's, I agree. I thought we had a council member that was.
We do, she was unable to attend today.
Oh, so that's, I think, helpful. That's one perspective.
But she's a former student. I think you're talking about current students.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that'll be helpful too, right?
I mean, we could assemble a group of currently incarcerated. We could put a focus group together online for this council if we wanted to. That's always an option. It takes some work from, like, we'll have to work on our staff and get the security to make that happen, but it's a possibility. I wouldn't even say it's a great suggestion. I think it's like imperative that we include their voices. I'm gonna be strong about that. I think it's really important.
At the easiest level, if we determine as a council specific data points that we want to gather from our student population, that's an easy batch of information that we can collect and bring to this group, as well as having, real-time representation. But if we wanted to gather if there was large data points we wanted to sample, we could do that as well, and then bring that information to this council.
I would just like to, I think that was a very well organized viewpoint. It was, and I accord with it. Absolutely, let's do both approaches. Yeah, because it is imperative.
So I wonder if there's some items on this agenda, for example, that if we decide to go down the road of some of these things, for example, the county jails or the educational programming pathway or whatever it might be, are there things that whoever is preparing that item, this work group that we're working on to identify education pathways, we might come up with some recommendations, but maybe as a group, we see if there's a way that we can engage students, whether it's a survey or a panel just for that issue. We had them up here live over the summer.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
Stephanie will organize this. We helped, but I thought it was good, right? It gave them an opportunity to sort of
utilize our area.
Yeah.
I think it would really speak to, you want to know about the population profile. I think that's a very good way to start that conversation.
We do surveys on the tablets regularly for different topics. So if we decide as a council, specific data we want to gather, that's easy to collect.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is what I'm hearing is potential for another agenda item that would be student lived experiences. That could be 23 minutes on agenda. I don't know.
It should be.
But another piece of that is engaging student voices on any and all of these issues in whatever way we can get them.
And yes, definitely. And I would say the kind of the second and maybe higher order sort of part of that process would be helping us interpret what we just heard, right? Like, so what are the kind of key takeaways from Andre's perspective, Yessi's perspective, that people like us who are going in can kind of use to help not just frame our interaction with our students in our classes, but the way the program's structured. That's what I need help with, I think that would help.
Yeah, and then it's that next order of operations, which we get some feedback. What do we do with it? Is it a movable thing that we can respond appropriately to, right? Sometimes it's just housing constraints, it's staffing challenges, right? It's not a lack of desire or willpower. Like, I'll give you a simple example. Maybe it's just about having study hours or quiet space, right? And like, that sounds like such an easy thing to deliver, but it's actually pretty complicated. It takes a lot of collaboration to get there. And of course we should do it. It's just, I think there's this expectation like, well, that's easy. We'll just, you know, it's never that easy. That's why I wanted to preface the whole presentation with delivering education in prison is super complex, right? And I don't just get to like rule with an iron fist and we're just gonna do what's right for them. Well, yes, we are, but it requires so much collaboration and sensitivity to a lot of other challenges.
And you know, none of us have all of that information. And so for us as a council to jump in and assume that we can solve the issues is unrealistic. I think that the goal should be more that we should identify challenges and then submit suggestions.
Yeah.
And then let the dust go where it will, you know, because there are those things we do not understand. So I think that should be our approach. And so if I could just finish, and I don't know, and one other, I'm sorry, if you were continuing your thoughts,
Don't lose yours.
I was just gonna say maybe identifying opportunities as part of that, right? Like, you know, because in the conversations, I think then opportunities rise to the surface, right? Of things that we can do within the constraints, right? Maybe they aren't really as easy as they may sound, but still opportunities. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm glad I let you speak. That's good. Mine was just a little bit of a pivot quickly. I would like to invite the council to help with another issue that we didn't raise, and very briefly, the state of Colorado has legislation in work that will grant incarcerated students in a year early release, 12-month early release. The system is currently set right now that incarcerated students receive a 4-month release, which is wonderful and a great step forward. I think an argument can be made for the need or for the benefits in having that 12-month release in light of how challenging it is to actually finish an associate's degree and how transformative that is for the person's life. That if we could identify research that supported the data, that it would reduce recidivism, and that that much of a time cut would be also consider the financial benefits that would happen, and could come together. And if we could then, and maybe we can't, but if we could come together and identify a strong case for that, then rather than going through legislation, I feel like at that point, then the council could take that to the board and pardons and say, here's what we'd like you to consider, and then allow them to make their decision.
And the board has,
that's something I would like.
They're a member of this council, so they've always been invited. I'm not sure that I've seen anyone from the board come yet, but it would be great to encourage them, because these are the issues that none of us get to weigh in on. Like, we can propose kind of the why behind who would benefit from a change like this and why it's important. But we had long conversations about getting the 4-month time cut, where I said they're working so hard to get an education wouldn't it make sense to give them some kind of incentive or time cut, just as we did for all kinds of other programs, right? And so we've always done it for technical certifications, but we never did it for an associate's. And to me, it didn't make sense. And the board explained that it was an equity and access issue, right? Not everyone maybe could afford higher education. We didn't want to create a perverse disincentive. To which I said, well, now that we have Pell, we're sort of equalizing this opportunity. So maybe this is the ripeness moment.
Yeah, and I guess and maybe there are these other reasons why in this state it wouldn't work, and I'm open to that as well. But I think that's something that I think the council could do. We could take a topic such as that or others and say, hey, let's bring it to the table, see if we can make an argument for or against it. If it's strong enough, then present that to the board and let them take that into consideration. I guess and I give that as an example because that is a specific thing I would like us to address, but it also ties back to what I was suggesting regarding how we accomplish the work and what our focus is as a council, that it is to collect data, to present evidence, to address problems, and then allow people to make decisions.
Issue down there. We do have on our other items list down there in the reintegration process. Maybe that's an addition to that kind of thing. But some of that maybe we deal with offline, but bring to the group. Just have some folks work together on what that looks like.
And we have, since we've last met, we have hired 2 of our 3 peer support specialists. Our third one is gonna close, I believe, this week. But those are people with lived experience that have navigated the system successfully, have gone through the training, are now reaching back to other people who are incarcerated to help them navigate reintegration. So we're doing that too, right? Just maybe it's not directly related to education, but it's a part of success.
All right, as far as the work plan, I mean, this is going to be something that's flexible as we go through the year, but if we can maybe identify some of these things, prioritize them in. Can maybe somebody help me articulate what that might look like? Going back to the lived experience, would we recommend an item on the agenda? And I'm not sure I was entirely following what we talked about this summer.
We had a corrections education meeting.
Oh, okay.
And
that's right.
as part of, then they were live streaming the students in, right? So that kind of situation,
So yeah, is that something that we put on one of our agendas, and what is the content of that piece of the agenda? And then maybe I can add a piece in here of let's, wherever we can, find out how to get that lived experience on a lot of these issues that are on the agenda.
I could offer, this could be done outside of this meeting, but I could communicate directly with anyone involved in this council and put together some type of data collection. Whether it's a survey we put out or anything like that, I would work with each institution. And June's probably a little soon, but maybe by the September meeting, we have that consolidated data. That's something we want to do to get that picture of the lived experience.
Okay, I'll add that to the September piece. Maybe that can be something to consider working on. And then regarding the time cuts, is that something you want to suggest adding here?
I would like us to consider that, and see what everyone consider it, and then we can come back and people can share what they've learned, if they think it's a good argument or not, and if we can make a case for it. So if there'd be a time in the future that we can say, let's address that topic.
Okay, then that seems like something that maybe you and someone from Board of Pardons and some others might get together and bring something that you pitch, and we can put the council innovative recommendation.
Thank you.
I'll add that to the list. Okay, any other thoughts, comments, recommendations? I guess chairs aren't supposed to make motions because I had a chair today, I would be making a motion. That we adopt this as our work plan with the addition of the student lived experiences proposed for September and the time cuts for associate degrees to work in where we can. So, maybe I can ask for a motion.
I make a motion to.
Ryan
I
makes
know
a
how you
motion.
said it. I second that motion. To adopt.
You're not going to cancel. I'll second. Okay. So any discussion on that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against members, any opposed, nay? Okay. All right. So we have a couple items that, oh no, back to the budget recommendation process. I think we've already kind of introduced this, so we don't have to spend much time on this, but the concept here is if you have some recommendations, and I'm speaking to institutions here, as well as our corrections folks, if you go and consider all of your financial needs for fiscal year 25, that would be the next budget request round, and bring those to us for discussion in our next meeting, then maybe we can suggest either supporting whatever you're going to turn into corrections or whatever you're going to turn into the Board of Higher Education for budget requests with a council recommendation on that. So the thinking is if you want to take a look at things that you are going to recommend for your higher program, your higher education programs in the corrections facilities, if you could maybe submit your need, the justification for that, what the budget is, and the recommended sources. If you send that to me, I'll get those with the chairs and we can compile them and consider them as council at our next meeting. Questions or comments, suggestions on that? Okay. So, I mean, if you need tablets or we need
And I think that
more equipment or add a program,
we'd be glad to put those together. I think we also need to have some strategy around how we can actually take some of the things, our critical needs, and move that in a direction that actually receives some support for those needs. Because it's great if we create a plan, list it, itemize it, but it didn't seem to go super well last year. So maybe I just need to hear some feedback or guidance from others about how I can approach it differently and do a better job. Because, you know, I do feel like one of our core limiters right now is just not great funding support for any of the things we're trying to accomplish, right? Like the building was built, it wasn't perfectly designed. We have some real challenges around that we're navigating. Some of those fixes are gonna be expensive. Obviously, technology, we're doing what we can with federal grants, but that's not a long-term strategy. That's very much a like, okay, we're gonna keep programs going, right? Because we're committed. So I would love, in addition to just itemizing a list, maybe getting some support or feedback about how do we do next year's legislative session more strategically.
and I think that can start with plugging in early in our regular budget process.
Yeah.
That could maybe help some of that.
Yeah.
But even then, what's our strategy having turned it in early?
Yeah, and I love we have the jails here because I think there's a lot of possibility of like sharing teachers' classrooms if we can go online for some of those things, right? But we have to have alignment of our technology has to work together. So that'll be a great discussion point.
Okay, so yeah, if you could turn those into me and along with your recommendations or even a question about how do I position this or resource it, let's bring those back and see what things we want to recommend as a council for the budget. So I don't know, I was just jotting down some things that might be possibilities. You have Davis Tech, Snow, Uinta Basin with your technical education programs or their equipment needs, support needs. with the SLIC and your general education? Are there support needs there? I think last year you were thinking about adding a counselor until the counselor bill came and then didn't go through.
Yeah, it just very briefly, what we're gonna do is, is very different. We're going to, with the restitution of Pell, if we streamline the process, 90 to 100% of the students should be eligible to receive that, is my understanding from the folks that visited us recently from there. And so that is a significant amount of revenue that an institution like Salt Lake Community College will bring in. And that revenue then, in part, needs to come back to support the infrastructure to handle that type of student need. So I feel, and these are discussions that are happening now in Salt Lake Community College, and I am quite confident that we're going to spend this year creating the infrastructure that way, with that understanding, rather than, and the beauty of that is we really, going back to these additional apps, we really don't need, if that's up and running, then we will not need additional funding from the state. We can create the infrastructure necessary and handle all of the needs for general education in the prison, just with that, with what we have currently and with what is provided.
Well, and I think the legislature will be very interested in that, as well as our corrections just on your regular budget and higher ed on the regular budget.
Absolutely.
What are some things that we can do to structure that won't require extra?
And I am the director of the program, so I am not in a position to say what Salt Lake Community College will do institutionally. I am able to say that this is the discussion that I'm having with those individuals, and it's just logical. So I'm confident that that will be the way that things transpire, and it is exciting time for them.
Okay, so we have two more agenda items before we get to our wrap up here. And I think, Andrea, we've cut your time in half here.
Great.
Maybe that's okay, because I think some of these you've touched on as part of the earlier conversations. But the chairs wanted to have the council have an opportunity to engage in conversation, or at least have some update on where we are with housing and mobility of incarcerated students, and then on tablets and educational technologies. So, Andrea.
So I think I mostly covered this in the presentation, but I can recap and also entertain any questions you guys have. As far as housing goes, I think one of the challenges that was it kind of created a very large debate during legislative session was this idea that we could create a housing section that was dedicated to education. Sounds really lovely. And I think maybe it's safe to say UDC is in support of it conceptually. The challenge that we face that's very real is that we don't have any security staff available to open new sections and provide that added security. So it's always a challenge of, if we're going to create new space, then we have to actually have more security, which means we have to have request more mandatory overtime of our staff who have been on continuous mandatory overtime for more than 2 years. We're talking all correctional staff, everyone that's certified, right? So it's a very big pain point for corrections, and I maybe didn't explain that well enough here. So it's important, it's actually critical that our housing leadership has the capacity to make decisions about what gets opened, how it gets opened, right? Because what we don't want to do is lose more staff because we put more mandatory overtime pressure on them. That doesn't help any of us, and it certainly doesn't give us more educational opportunities. So I just want to kind of highlight the delicate situation that we're facing and how we're actually trying to create some housing strategies around co-locating people in education. Probably won't be just strictly education, will probably be education, treatment, maybe they have a correctional industry job. But places, where people that are they're gainfully employed, they're working on themselves to better themselves, all co-locating. Of course, though, if we open up a section, it's nearly impossible to close it, right? And so that is another demand on our staff. So we're just trying to negotiate how to do that in a way that's thoughtful, that doesn't create more overtime demands, and that's holistic for the whole system, right? I think that's what I'm trying to explain. And I think those conversations are going well. I know the director over prison operations, Dan Chestnut, he's wonderful to work with. He's my friend, buddy. We have a lot of good conversations. We're definitely in lockstep in partnership. We want to do the same things. We just need to do it in a way that's helpful for our housing, our staffing challenges. So that's kind of where we're at. It's just a conversation. I don't want to overcommit or overpromise anything. I would say that it's a valuable conversation that we continuously have and are working on.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we can do things with current resources and how we position things, right? But if we're going to go beyond that, then we need to find some way to get additional resources, which is a little more complicated. Funding, we got to get people to actually sign on to do it.
Yeah, I think, we need to hire some more people optimally, right? But I wouldn't say that's, it's about getting creative about how you assign and place security staff across the institution. Are you using it effectively? We're, in some places we've been civilianizing non-critical positions where you don't need a badge and a gun to do the work, right? So that we could free up those resources to put them, deploy them in other places. Like, I cannot tell you like the craziness of the work it takes to keep a prison safe, right? Like, it just is, especially when it's a new prison and there's not a ton of people that live in this area. Like, we drew from that Draper area, and a lot of the people that we could rely upon for security staff didn't come with us in the prison move. And so there's just this period of like, we're trying to recruit new people and we're doing a good job of it. So our recruitments are going up, we're getting people through the academy, but this is the delicate balance of putting it all together so that we can be in a position where we can have co-occurring educational housing, right? And I'm not saying no, it won't happen. I think it will happen. I just think that we're negotiating a bunch of pieces at the same time.
Okay. I'm interested in comments from the council. And by the way, I'll just put somebody on the spot and check my chat. And let you know that we have Alan, I'm going to butcher your name, Alan Walkendorfer from the Vera Institute, who's on the Zoom. I don't know if you're listening or available. If you ever have any wisdom on anything we're talking about from your national experience, just love for you to chime in. David, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. I know that it was one of our recommendations last year is let's have students housed together. Thoughts on?
Well, right now, we have over 200 active students in our programming. We have not had an open enrollment now for over a year. We are also now going to move into, with Greg Plopper's help and orchestrating this, back into the green.
Alan, can you hear okay?
I need to speak louder. I'm sorry. I'll speak louder. So with Brian's help, we are also moving back into the green facility where Dr. Bradbury, what was the estimate that you had of SLIC students right there? And then
Close to 50.
About 50, right? So, and we haven't had admissions there or in general population. So that means this fall, I anticipate a number of active students to be over 300. So between that and Davis Tech, it seems to me that we should be able to, there are about 60 or so, 60, 65 prisoners in each housing section. So it seems to me that if we're talking numbers such as that, 300 or so students, and if we're talking about combining with Davis Tech, that we should be able to just move folks around so that in these housing sections, that it's all of the SLIC students and the tech students and the UPEP students too. We can add that in, and the numbers are there to justify a couple of housing sections pretty quickly, I think.
I can add a little bit of more detail as to one of the obstacles we're running into is as policy is currently, but acknowledging the policy can change as well. Certain individuals are allowed to be together, like in a class or at a job, but they're not allowed to live together. So that is one of the difficulties we're running into. So I'll use Davis Tech, for example. So in students from Bear Run, from Bear Low, who are not allowed to interact in living conditions in any way, are allowed to go to Davis Tech class together. They're not allowed to go to a SLIC class together because of housing is arranged. So that is one of the difficulties we're running into is they can go to class together during the day, but as policy is written, once again, policy could be changed, but as it is now, they wouldn't be allowed to cohabitate together. So trying to iron out that has been one of the obstacles that we're trying to work around.
Thank you. That is the first time I've ever heard that, and that makes perfect sense. That's
Chris Jansen, you have hand up.
Yeah, I really appreciate the dialogue on this and understand the transition challenges, particularly in light of the new facility. But if you recall, this was maybe the top recommendation that we made last time. And I think that we've got to stick with this one. Anytime I'm analyzing something, I look at it as this is systemic change that can have really significant impact. And indeed, I think we all concluded this is one. And so if there's legislators that we can speak with or any influencers that we can potentially have dialogue with, I really think that this is a key one. This is a really important one that can actually impact, I think overall, even safety, but also real impact to the education of these incarcerated individuals. So just with this comment, I know I'm not saying anything that's new to anyone, but I do think this is one that we've got to keep on the docket and we need to keep beating this drum.
I wonder if this is something that, I just lost my train of thought. That never happened, right? But I wonder if this is something that we keep on there. Like you said, Rich, it was one of our top, if not the top, recommendation on our report last year. But there's lots of pieces that maybe the focus this year is on how to do it. We know here's the ideal and what we want to do. Okay, maybe this year it's how do we do this? How do we combine students in facilities? How do we look at policy or what's safe in that policy and find the safe reason for it?
I would say I feel like that complicates the situation significantly because I can understand, I can think through reasons why such a policy would exist and it would make sense. So to jump in and say, oh, let's recommend that policy change, we start doing that. I don't know that that's a recommendation I could feel comfortable with because I can think of a million reasons why that would be the case. And so I personally feel, and I am the one that has been advocating for this so passionately because it is the way forward. We have to do this, but I also now feel like that's a complexity there that is beyond what the council can consider.
Well, I think
That's
allow us to look at the policy and see if there's some wiggle room there, right? You know, of course they build policies for good reason, right? And also housing is a privilege when you're in a privileged area, like let's say it's an education housing situation, there's a lot at stake for that individual and they don't want to lose it. And it could be enough that they're willing to, you know, work together, be good co-residents. Maybe there's obviously they're going to lose that privilege if they do something that is not within the bounds of the expectation. So I wouldn't say that it's an absolute no. There could be some people that are absolute no's, right? But there might be, we could create an exception exceptional carve out for those who are in higher education and see how it goes.
And I appreciate that, and I see that perspective as well. I guess what I'm trying to articulate is that I feel like that there are so many layers of complexity to that should be, knowing that corrections is working towards that, knowing that everyone is on the same page, knowing that we are going to make that happen, for me is good enough, because that's a lot of complexity there that I don't know that I even would feel qualified to jump
I mean,
into.
there's gang involvement, there's safety
Yeah.
issues, there's medical levels, it's
Yes,
way
yes.
more than just.
So
Could
I guess what I'm saying is I feel comfortable knowing where it is and letting corrections keep moving forward.
Yeah, could I make one other comment on that? I don't think now is the timing. It sounds like there's enough complexity in the system right now, but maybe this is a matter of timing even more than doing it. But I would sure hate to see us let this one go.
We keep it up there, we find ways to do, I mean, we already have things in there where we're gonna try to make decisions about relocation.
I think it's doable. Will it be perfect? No. There will be some people that are excluded from this housing for various very probably important reasons, but it doesn't mean we can't have ambitious goals and keep moving forward.
Yeah, and already in your statutory report now, you have to report on how many transfers were there and other things that interrupted education. So that's gonna keep it on there.
Yeah.
It's not gonna make it perfect, it's not gonna solve everything, but at least we're looking at it, we're reporting on it. And finding ways to, I got a chat comment here from Alan, he had to leave. Wachendorfer, from Vera, says, can you do education housing at both security levels and allow commingling of students when attending classes, since they're allowed to go to chow together? Anyway, just throwing out thoughts.
Totally. And I think that's the creativity that's required, right? We're just gonna have to get a little creative.
Okay. I would welcome, whether it's in this meeting or somebody articulate this between now and the next meeting. I don't know if we have this on the agenda yet. We could certainly put it back on later if we want to. But I would welcome somebody to articulate a recommendation from the council relating to the housing issue. And maybe it's not specific as to we're gonna solve world hunger and all that other stuff 100%, but we're gonna make some progress by looking at these ideas and those ideas, and maybe we're gonna.
I like your suggestion. I can't remember the name yours, Jared, that perhaps what we do is we come up with some ideas that we could recommend as to ways that it could happen.
Yeah.
And then send that up with Kura, with you guys, so that you can address that.
Yeah.
I thought that was, I can't remember where to that. That was a good, I thought that was a good suggestion.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, there are places nationally who have executed some version of this. Do we just pull off a copycat maneuver and just see what the best practices are and maybe which ones of those might fit within our framework? I mean,
and that's how we make that argument and present it, is by looking at, for example, what other states are doing.
You're absolutely right. The challenge that we've always run into when we look at other states is there's such variety in how prisons are arranged in each state. Like, I can't remember, California has how many prisons? It's often the case that other states will have whole education places for, like, a whole prison dedicated to education, right? Like, Utah's very different, right? And we maybe can work towards a model around something like that. What's interesting about what we do that a lot of other states don't do is we contract with all of these county jails, right? So if we look at it globally, we can consider the jails as satellites, and maybe they specialize in something and people get housed together to do that thing, right? I think that's how we have to, there's the challenge though, is that we're so unique in the way we're organized, we have to work within those particular constraints.
And I can actually give one specific example I think is significant. In many states, those who are incarcerated for sexual offense are housed together. In the state of Utah, the number is so high that makes it impossible. So those who are there for sex offense are there in general population. there's just one example of how, of the unique challenges that we would face as a state. So even looking at the way the other systems were running, it wouldn't be, that's not to say we shouldn't look. You know, we should definitely do that and conduct the research, but recognize what Andre is saying.
So, yeah, go ahead.
And I know this is a separate, right, but because it's a county jail, but Metro County Jail just here in Salt Lake City has an education pod, right, devoted to education. So that's very different than a prison, so I'm acknowledging that, but we don't even have to go super far to see an example.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could suggest that, David, would you be willing to work with maybe Brian and articulate a recommendation around housing, even if it's just, we're gonna have some look at it. Then we can bring it back to the council and maybe discuss a bit and say, yeah, we support this. Here's something we can take to corrections to encourage them to keep doing what they're already doing or do something additional or different, and as well as higher education in the institutions.
Thank you. Yes, I accept that.
I'm gonna make Chris help too.
Anybody else? And myself.
Ask Chris that.
I trust in the Department of Corrections to keep doing their good work.
You don't have
They require our input. Yeah, there you go.
Wait, was that on record?
That's recorded. That's
Okay, so
fine.
what did he say?
No, I just said that I support you guys. I believe that you guys are doing the work that's necessary. I don't think it requires council. Yeah, keep doing your thing, will you? But we did vote it on there, and Rich suggested we keep it on there. We don't have to, we can vote it on.
Yeah, and maybe it's a
maybe it's
visit
just
with
an
Salt
update.
Lake County to see how they accomplish that, and, you know, I mean.
Yeah, I think we do go to and look to other states and other systems and start conducting some research as to how they manage it. And then Brian and I can look at that together and come back and report to the council. I wouldn't see it necessarily as that he and I are gonna solve the problems and then we're gonna go tell corrections what to do, as much as, hey, here, this is an issue. We do not want to abandon. We all know that we need to get there. We know that there are problems and some that we don't even recognize yet. But let's conduct some research and come back and report to the council.
Thank you. So Andrea, educational technology and tablets, anything that we're going to discuss further?
So one of the things that we're trying to figure out how to move forward on, tablets, obviously, we have Valerie who, she's amazing. She's our tablet technician, but she's running all of these tablets on her own. So I'm trying to figure out ways to budget some support so she has somebody at each institution at least sort of giving her a little boots on the ground support to deploy tablets, fix them, deal with minor issues, things like that. I need her to focus on kind of getting some new technology rolled out on the tablets. So that's one thing we've been working on. At the end of the year, we're authorized to put forward our end of year spending requests and see if they get approved. We put in our computer labs on the end of the year request. They were not approved by leadership. It wasn't that they don't see the value in it. They support it, they want it. They're just worried if once we build these computer labs, it's not the upfront costs that are challenging, it's the ongoing costs of getting the IT support, because we contract with DTS, and so we have to pay for that, and then we have to pay for all the software updates and support and things like that. And they were just worried if we're overcommitting ourselves when we don't have a secure source of funding. So that's one of the things, but I recognize that's huge. Tablets are one thing, and they're great, and they're useful. But if you're trying to write a research paper and get the research and then type it on you're not typing a research paper on a tablet. So we have to come up with a way to move forward with our computer labs. I think that's going to be huge and critical for us right now. And
that can either be some foundation stuff or some of Sam's magic, free stuff.
Again, though, it's not building the lab that's the challenge, right? We can do that. We could solicit donations and have a lab built tomorrow, probably, or pretty close to it. What we don't know how to do is maintain those labs so that they get upgraded, they have the technology they need, that we have capacity with IT support.
could we combine some funding? I mean, certainly like we could help fund like a half a person, right? Like, because if you have computer labs and tablets that are helping us like give education, right? Like we would be bought into that, right? We could.
Yeah,
could we,
I
like,
mean,
combine
I'm
some
just
funding and
I'm
get
sharing
creative?
because I'm like, really think this is a crux for us that we're a little bit
Yeah.
stuck in, and we're, you know, I'm getting better at writing federal grants, but that's not always like, that just is, once you're on that federal grant kind of timeline, then you have a lot of heavy reporting requirements, and you're continuously having to solicit new federal grant funding to keep maintain, and you can't hire people in federal grants typically because it doesn't support personnel costs, so we're a little constrained right now, but I know we'll find a way through. I'm sharing with everyone, that's kind of like, our tablets we obviously didn't receive funding to expand any of them, so we're not purchasing any additional tablets. So right now, we can continue to the status quo of 1 tablet per 2 people. Not optimal, but it's where we're at, and it does continue to provide access to tablets. Most people really love the tablets. What I would say is not working well is we have a portion of the population that lacks so much technology skill and exposure that they don't even know how to begin, right? And we don't have any staff that can say, let me sit down with you and help you understand how a tablet works, why you might want to use one. So I think there are people that aren't getting the benefit of the tablet because they don't even know how to engage, right? Like we're talking very low capacity to understand technology, probably to the detriment of their capacity when they get released to navigate society. So we need to figure that piece out. And then as far as like, we're putting new interesting things on tablets, that's going well. Forms are going well. Anything that higher education needs to upload, that doesn't seem to be a challenge. We've been able to put educational materials on our tablets very readily, and that's going well. So our tablets are proving to be effective and do the job that they've been asked to do. I just think there's some funding insecurity that we're facing and some need for more investment in support staff around the technology that we're using so that we can help people access it more effectively. Those are my observations right now. Anything else?
And usually, sorry, yeah, I'll just add, you know, each institution has different technological needs.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is work individually with these institutions and help their needs to be met. And I don't think we're at 100% needs being met, but everyone's a little bit different. So that's on corrections and how we try to address technological needs. Like Andrea said, the tablets are great, but they don't necessarily, they're not what every institution needs to run the programs.
Yeah. And I will never abandon in-person teaching because we have a ton of humans in our prisons that need to be appropriately socialized, engaged with other humans, right? So that's always going to be at the fore of my goal for education. So I just want to balance our conversation around because I focus on technology a lot. I see the value, and also people need other people to be functional, and a lot of them are missing that piece.
Appreciate that. We also had another comment from Sam. Can you do a pilot one facility to measure outcome? That might have been on the earlier item, but good idea on anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so tablets. It seems like there are a lot of issues that go beyond what is going on with the current programming in the higher education institutions, and so I think as far as this council's role, the things that we can or need to do with respect to higher education, maybe some of those you're just resolving with the institutions, but if there's something that we need to take further than that, I think that we can just be cheerleaders on tablets beyond that. So, okay, so according to statute, we need time for public comment. Is there anybody from the public that would have some comments? Brian's looking at Russ over there.
If Russ has any comments.
I have no comments.
And I think our public is that speak out. Sam, any comments that you have? Not a lot of time here, but appreciate you being here and listening. Does everybody know Sam? Is that everybody?
Hola.
Okay. Anything else that you would like to add?
I tried to put it on the chart. I think when we're wrestling with difficult situations, it looks different on paper. Pilot is the word that I think needs to become more popular with dealing with these problems. Because if we do a pilot, then ideas would come and then we actually experience firsthand those things that we are afraid of. So that's what I am most interested in. Given our situation at Utah State, I think it was, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years that we were not offering this. And when we did a pilot, we discovered possibilities that wasn't on paper because no one has written a paper or published it or put it in as a brief. But if you just boldly confront the issue and say, let's do a pilot, then that's low commitment. It's for a year, it's for 6 months. I think we'll discover some ways to at least get started. And that's something that I'm willing to engage if that's of interest to the council. We can pilot these ideas and get a lot more data that would help us. So I'm so that we have what we need to provide post-secondary education in San Juan jail only because we spent a year just going at it with just what we have. We didn't get any external funding. And so yeah, I'll be happy to help if there are interest in that. And I think we'll find a way to make it happen. It may not be as fancy, but anything is better than nothing when it comes to post-secondary education. That's really my 2 cents.
Thank you. Great way to do what you can with what you have and then learn from it. So, no, I'm just going to put you on the spot just because you're out there on Zoom. Any thoughts or comments you've had as we talked today?
Yeah, that's for me?
No, Helen.
Oh, okay.
Nothing. I don't have anything to add. Sorry I couldn't be there in person today though, but it's good hearing all the ideas, suggestions, and what's been able to happen with this past legislative session. So thank you.
Okay. With that, it's 3:01 and there's no other business. Anybody want to make a
Motion to adjourn.
Thank
you.
Thank you, everyone. And we need to get on to yours.
Oh, yeah.
You want to?